first thing we are going to do today is I'm going to show you how to make concrete columns in Revit. We will then add structural steel reinforcement bars to these columns, and I'm going to show you two examples. We're going to do a rectangular column and we're going to do a circular column, because they both have a different method of adding reinforcement to these two different kinds of columns. So let's open our Revit. Let's do a new Revit file. And because we are doing structural drawings, we want to pick a structural template. The structural template has specific elements in it that relate to structure, just like the architectural template had specific things that related to architecture. So we're going to pick structural template. And we don't need to go into browse, and we're just going to say OK. Again, when we're drawing, we want to stay within our elevation markers if we can. If you recall from previous Revit courses, we can move these if we need to, if they are in our way. The next thing we want to do is we want to use the structure tab. Again, this has items that pertain to structure, so it's very important that we use these tools to help us do our work. So I want to go to my level 1 plan. Now you'll notice in your project browser you have level 1 and you have level 1 analytic. So what is the analytic versus a regular level? The analytic model is a simplified 3D representation of the full engineering description of a structural physical model. The analytical model consists of those structural components, geometry, material properties, and loads that together form an engineering system. The analytical model of a structure is comprised of a set of structural member analytical models, including one for each element in the structure. Again, this is more for the engineering side of things versus the drafting side. We will have our analytical model, but we will typically be working in our regular floor plans. So again, I'm going to start in level 1, and the first thing I want to do is go to my column tool. If I click on my column tool and I look underneath it, I have a couple of concrete rectangular columns, and I have some W-shaped columns. W-shaped columns are steel columns, and we will talk a lot more about these when we get into our steel drawings. So I also need a round column. So again, if I want to add things to my structural menus, I want to go through Load Family under this tab. And if I scroll on down, you'll see I have structural columns. And then you'll see I have concrete. So here I have the rectangular one and I have a round one. And so I'm going to pick the round column. So now if I go back to my structure tab and I pick column, I now have some round ones. So I'm just going to pick a rectangular column, and I want to change up here my depth to height, and I want to change it from unconnected to level 2. Now I'm going to place that column. Then I'm going to do the same thing with my round column, and I'm going to use an 18-inch column. And again, I want to make sure that my height is set to level 2, and I'm going to place it directly beside my other column. And I'm going to zoom in here. And right now, they're pretty small at the scale that I'm at. So I want to come down here and change my scale to 1:1. Now I can see more detail. And I'm also going to take this and I'm going to move it over so they're closer together. So now you'll see it has the hatching in place for me. If I go to my 3D view and I look at these columns, you can see I have 3D columns. This line here in the middle is part of that analytic. If I wanted to turn that off, I can come down here to where it says hide analytical model, and you'll see those lines will disappear. So now I'm going to go back to my level 1 plan. Again, I want these enlarged so that it makes it easier to add my rebar. So the first thing we want to do is go back to the structure tab, and you'll see we have something here that says cover. Once I pick on the cover tool, you'll notice in my rectilinear column I have a green dash line, and in my round column I have another green dash line. This has to do with these cover settings. The cover is the offset between the point of the outside of the column and where the reinforcement is going to be placed. Basically, we don't want our rebar to come completely to the outside of our columns or any concrete product. And there are 3 reasons we don't want this to happen. First one is for corrosion protection. If the rebar was on the edge of the column, it would be exposed to weather and it would corrode. And then it would become weak and it would collapse. So it needs that concrete protection around it. The other one is for fire protection, because again, metal will melt at some point if the heat gets high enough. Concrete will last longer. If we took the steel reinforcing bars all the way to the edge of the concrete, then they would melt, and then that would cause failure of the concrete. The other one is to help protect the column and make it stay structural as we want it. We need the concrete to be able to grab it on all sides of the steel. So that is another reason for having this cover area. Now, if we select our column, you'll see we can pick different kinds of cover settings. You can have exterior ones and you can have interior ones. If we don't find what we need that is here, if we go to the 3 dots, we can actually add stuff into here. So if your engineer wants you to do something different than what we already have in there, you can just add, or you can take things out, you can duplicate. Again, lots of flexibility there. For our purposes, I'm just going to go with the interior framing columns of 1.5 inches. So again, I can, once I've selected it, I can pick the whole thing, I can pick one side, but I want to pick the whole thing. So I'm going to do that for both of mine. Also, once I have placed it, if I click on my column, you see I still have those same choices over here. So I can change the top, the bottom, other. So again, I have flexibility in my properties toolbar. So now we are ready to place our rebar. The first thing we're going to do is go to the rebar tool, and it's going to tell us this, and we're going to say OK. And when we do, it brings up this menu over here on the right. And you see we have different rebar shapes. If we scroll down through it, we're going to look for the one that makes a rectangle. So we can use rebar shape T1, or we could use rebar shape T2. Again, I am no structural engineer, but your engineer will tell you which one to use. So I'm going to use the T1. So I'm going to zoom into my column, and I need to set it to the near cover reference, and I need to make sure that it's clicked on parallel to work plane. So now I go to far cover reference, and when I place it over my drawing, it shows up, and then I can decide where I want the connection or the overlap of that stirrup to be, and I'm just going to pick right there. Now, something that I do want to do is I want to set my drawing to fine. This way I can actually see the thickness of that. Now I'm going to go to my 3D view. I can see where I placed that rebar. So now I need to carry these stirrups or rebar up through my whole column. If I click on this, you'll see my menu change. So I can go from a single one to either a fixed number. I can say I want 10, whatever. I can say maximum spacing. I can say number with spacing, or the minimum clear spacing, and then it will determine the number that are needed. So I'm going to say the maximum spacing is going to be 12 inches or 1 foot. And if I hit enter, you'll see now it spaced them out appropriately. Again, I could change from maximum spacing to minimum clear spacing, and it would be very similar. The next thing that I need to do is I need to run my vertical rebar. We always typically have rebar that runs horizontally, and then we also have rebar that runs vertically. So I'm going to go back to my level 1 plan, and now I'm going to go back to my structure tab. I'm going to go back to rebar. Again, my menu automatically opened up for me. If for some reason it does not, there are 3 dots right here that you can click on to either open or close that menu. So I'm going to scroll up to the top, and this time I'm going to pick the straight rebar because this is going to go vertically in my column. If I come over here to the way it's set right now, it's running the wrong direction. So I want to change that to be perpendicular to cover. Again, I can choose for it to do a single one. I can choose for it to do a fixed number. I can do a maximum spacing, a number with spacing, minimum clear spacing. So I'm going to go with a fixed number. I want 3 in the horizontal direction. So I'm going to do fixed number, and I'm going to say 3. And then I'm going to say 3. Then if I just want one more on this side, again, I'm going to go back to my rebar to cover, and I'm just going to place a single one on each side. Now, if I go back to my 3D view, you can see I have my vertical rebar running in. So that is how you would do a rectilinear column. This also works for beams. It also works for putting rebar in floor slabs. So this is kind of just a general overview of how to do that. As far as the sizes of these, the location of these, all of that will come from an engineer that tells you where to place those and what size those need to be. If I wanted to change the thickness or the diameter of these rebar, all I have to do is select it and come over here and I can change it. Typically all the rebar is going to be the same size, so that's pretty simple. Now for the round column, it's done a little bit differently. So again, I'm going to go here to rebar, and I'm going to scroll down to find the spiral. And if I try to place the spiral in here, it doesn't matter where I pick, it's not going to let me. There is an issue with the spiral, and this is not just something I came up with. I researched it, and this is a problem. So I'm going to grab the round, and right now, again, it's going the wrong direction. So I want it to be parallel to the work plane, and I want to place it to where it fits within that line. So now, again, if I wanted to change it from a number 4 to say a number 5, I can do that. If I go to my 3D view and I look, all I have is the one rebar. So I can select it here, and if I come up here, I have shape, and right now it is just a T3. And if I go here, I have one that says SP, which is spiral. And I can hit apply, and you can see now that we have the spiral in there. If I want to change this, I can just click on it, and I can change the pitch to be, say, 6 inches. And you'll see it will change it. So again, I have some flexibility there. I'm going to go back to my level 1 plan, and now I need to add the other rebar. So if I go back to my structure tab and I pick on rebar, and again to my straight rebar, if I try to place it right now, it's in the wrong direction, so I want it perpendicular to cover. And if I come over and select near cover reference, I'm just going to place 1 bar for right now. Next, I'm going to select that, and I'm going to go to array, and I'm going to select radial array, and for the number I'm going to do 8. I'm going to move this to last, and I want to place the center rotation at the center of my column. So I've got 8 of these, and I want it to go 360 degrees around. But if I put in 360, that will not work. I need to figure out what the angle is between the 8, which is 45 degrees. So if I put in 315, it will not put one on top of another one. If I did 360, it would put double here. So if I do that and I hit enter, now I have my 8, and you see it stopped it right there. Now if I go back to my 3D view, now I have my vertical bars. And I just changed that to my thick line so you can see it just a little bit better. If I don't want to see this analytic in here, again, I can come over here and turn that off. Rebar basically works the same whether it's in a column, a beam, a foundation. You just got to make sure that you put the right cover on it, you put the correct spacing, the correct bar size, etc. You need to create a folder in your OneDrive for poured in place concrete, and you need to save these columns that you just did in that folder, as you will have to turn this in for the assignment for poured in place concrete. So the next thing we will do is we will create an actual concrete structure.